Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome in. It's Jim Jackson here, Jim Jackson Show. You can follow me at Jim Jackson Show on Instagram, and also where you download your favorite podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You can follow me, pick it up. Thank you for coming. I wish everybody, it's that time of the season. Not only is it Christmas time, but it's NBA Emirates Cup time. And I want to just open the show with this, and it's not a lot. I know it's been a lot of question about it last year, where it's at. I think it's picked up a lot of momentum. The thing I loved about it this year was this, is that I felt the fans in the stadiums understood it a lot more. I think the NBA did a really good job, again, of identifying Tuesdays and Thursdays as the days that this event is going to take place. And always, when you have something new that's instituted, it takes time to kind of build up to something that people look forward to, that it's not a gimmick. But what I saw more importantly this year was the buy-in with the teams. That really, I think, was the impetus of what we saw last night. And I'll get on that with the Golden State-Houston game. But the premise behind it is that athletes are going to compete. You're going to compete once you get into the game, okay? Not that during the regular season you don't have games, but because there's a different designation, the elite of the elite will compete. And I think we've really have seen this year. And for example, last night, I don't know if you watched it, if you saw the Houston game, how competitive that game was. But you had to watch the end of it. The end of it, after Houston finally won, said a lot to me. Did you see the excitement on the faces of those young men, the coaching staff, hear the crowd, how excited they were to win that game? You won't see that during the regular season. Yeah, somebody may make a last-second shot, half quarter, whatever, win the game. But that level of excitement from that young Houston team says it all. It says how important it is, even when you don't think that the Emirates Cup, the in-season tournament, has any kind of relevance, like winning a trophy for an in-season cup doesn't matter. Well, it does, especially to a team like Houston, who's trying to figure out what their identity is, who they are. Ime Udoka is saying, listen, it's a certain way we have to play. If we play that way, we can be successful. Well, there's no better proof in the pudding than when you're able to beat a Golden State and advance to the semifinals to get to the Emirates Cup. So everything the coaching staff was preaching now comes to fruition, and now the voices are heard a lot louder and with more depth because they've seen the success behind the teaching. Those young men really, really put their heart and soul in that, and they felt like they've accomplished something. Not that they're done, but to get to the semifinals. Where does this push this Houston team? We're already looking at this Houston team like, they're in the top 5 in the West right now. Defensively, they're a lot better. Offensively, they still have to get better. But winning something like this, getting to the semifinals, mean a lot. Look what it did for the Indiana Pacers last year, who people weren't talking about until they were able to beat the Milwaukee Bucks, get into the semifinals, get into the finals, and end up losing to the Lakers. But where that propelled them for the rest of the season and ultimately into the playoffs, because it gave that young team confidence. And to me, that's the most important part, especially for a team like the Houston Rockets, who were kind of carving out their identity as this rough, defensive-minded, extra energy, hustle team that's going to just grind you out and outwork you. And now you start to see those seeds the seeds that you planted start to grow and now start to pay off. So shout out to the Houston Rockets, Ime Udoka, the coaching staff, the organization, for having these young men in the right frame of mind to be competitive and now get themselves to a semifinals. I love every minute of it watching the game last night because at the end of the day, that's what the game is all about. As promised, a really good friend, former NBA champion, 3-time NBA champion, BJ Armstrong, of course, with Chicago Bulls, but also played with Golden State, Charlotte, back in Chicago too as well. Native of Detroit. I got a quick question though. This is my thing.
Yes,
Brother Rice High School, Detroit, outside. They had 2 7-footers on that team.
Oh wow! You go
I remember because you came down to Toledo and played Scott at high school, and I was in maybe in the 8th grade at the time. I think you
Okay.
guys came in. You did have two twins, right? 7-footers.
Yep. 7 foot, the Lanier twins.
Right. Whatever happened to them? Those two.
They were behind me by a few years. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I know they both went to college. They were both 7 feet something. Um, big prospects, big names, but that is a great that you remember that. That's
Yeah,
going
bro.
way back. So we did. I remember that. That's 30 plus years for me that you remember coming down there. But
Uh-huh.
that's interesting. You remember that. Look at you doing
Oh,
your
come
research.
on,
Look at you.
man. No, 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 no. I'm a bad. I remember just because, later on, this was after I left. Chris Webber, Shane Battier, Country Day came down
Right.
and played Scott, but you guys came and played. But for you, growing up in Detroit, why Brother Rice? Why not Southwestern? Why not some of the city schools, Pershing, stuff like that? Why
Right.
was it Brother? I know from an education perspective, I'm sure that had something to do with it,
Yep.
but basketball wise.
Well, my parents, that was basically I was a young kid growing up in the city of Detroit. And my parents, they said, this is where you're going to school. So I really didn't have a choice in the matter. At the time, I didn't understand. I wanted to go to the Detroit public schools because those were all my friends went to school. Growing up in Detroit, that's what I knew. I grew up in the city. And suddenly, when it was time for me to go to high school, my parents said, this is where you're going to high school. And I sulked a little bit. I pleaded my case to no avail. And growing up, Jim, I'm sure you've been into Detroit a few times, but there was a place called Detroit St. Cecilia, and the late Sam Washington was there, and he was also instrumental in saying, you know what, this is probably the best place for BJ. So I had no say so in it. I went there. I can't say that I was happy on day one. But now 57 years old, it was without question the best decision in my life. It's affected me from this point moving forward. And like I say, sometimes your parents do know best. And when it came to that decision, that was the best
Uh,
thing for me to have that opportunity to see a world, Jimmy, that I had never seen before, and be able to go to school to see how other people live outside of the city of Detroit and to experience the things that I experienced as a young kid. So I'm very happy that I did it, but as a young kid, 14, 15 years old, I wasn't happy about it.
hey, I got two things on that. My parents, for whatever reason, I went to my neighborhood school was majority all black.
Right.
Parents got together going into the second grade to send us to a local Catholic school. So it was
Okay.
like five families sent their kids over here. I'm in the second grade. I go from an all black school, Baptist background, to a Catholic school, Mass on Wednesday, regular church on Sunday. I'm confused. I don't know I got nuns. I don't know what, I'm in the second grade. I got suspended, bro, in the second grade for acting up. And I got sent right back to the public school the next year. So my
Right, right.
parents tried the Catholic school thing. They was like, nah, that's
Well,
not him. It's not
see,
gonna
your
work.
parents gave you a choice. I didn't have a choice. I had to make this work.
Right.
So I tried to mess it up. I couldn't mess it up, and I had to finish. So they said, no matter what you do, you're going to finish here. And but no, it's interesting. And I have to admit, I was totally out of my comfort zone.
Mhm.
I didn't know anyone there. I was going to a new school, a new environment, Catholic school. We had to wear
Predominantly white, right?
predominantly white, shirt and tie,
Hmm.
penny loafers. We had a uniform structure. It was just totally different. But again, I can't say enough what I was able to learn and how that's affected me moving forward in my adult life. So, but I tried, Jimmy. I tried what you did, and it didn't work. It just didn't work.
Hey, hey, listen. So you mentioned St. Cecilia. When I was in high school, for whatever reason, Ohio had a law where we could not play at the same because it
Okay.
wasn't
Oh, really?
sanctioned. So
Okay.
I played at River Rouge in the
All right.
summertime. I played Sandy Sanders, but
Oh, yeah.
I also played over at Belmont, over at the church.
Everybody plays at Belmont.
Yeah, on Sundays. So
Yeah, on Sundays.
DC,
Yep.
Funches back in the
Yep.
day.
Oh, wow.
Come on, I see Funches all the time. He goes to Michigan game because his son played receiver there. But
Yep. Yep.
that's where I had to come and play
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't play at the Sing. Because
Right.
they wouldn't allow it in Ohio because you would lose your eligibility. But I
Eligibility.
learned so
Okay.
much by playing and developed, I would think, a confidence as I started going to Belmont right after my freshman year.
It's Sunday
We would
morning.
play
That was the run. That was the
Sunday
run. Sunday
morning, and
morning.
you
Yeah,
know
Sunday
who
morning.
took me?
Who's
Melvin
that?
Newbern.
Oh, really? Yeah,
It's
everybody
from
was
Toledo.
there. Yeah,
Everybody was
yeah.
there. The
Everybody
mural of
was there.
magic on the wall.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone
Yeah.
was there. That's where I met DC. I met DC, I think he was in 8th or ninth grade. That's when I first met Derek Coleman. And a quick DC story. So Derek came up there, and the best player at that time in the city, because that's where you got your reputation. And you had to be the best at the Saint, and you had to be the best at Belmont. There was a young man, rest in peace, Roy Tarpley,
Oh
at that
yeah. I
time
played with
was the
Roy.
senior. Yeah, yeah. Roy was there, and it was this young, gangly kid, and that was DC. And that's when I first met Derek, coming up to the runs at Belmont. So everyone came to Belmont. I must have missed you. I must have missed you for some reason during that time. But yeah, everyone came up there, whether you're a pro, high school, college, and the very best of the best. As you know, they're very competitive games. And if once you lost, you probably didn't get back on the court because it was a long
I'm
line.
telling you.
So yeah, but it was great. But that's why I met DC. I just spoke to DC actually couple days ago. So we all keeping, all of Detroit guys, I'm sure, like all you guys,
Yeah.
Dennis Hobson and everybody.
Uh-huh.
I just spoke to your man Oak, a
Oh,
couple
did you
days
so
ago as
dope?
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Oak's driving around the country as usual. So, but no,
Always.
that's interesting that you played up there because that was such a great time, and that's how all of us learned how to play. You played on Sunday. You called your own fouls, and
Big time.
yeah, and they were very competitive games.
Well, you talked about greatness too, and you've been around it enough in the NBA now, what you're doing from an agency perspective. Is it a fair question? And I know you were on a podcast, you talked about different things, like the greatest player. And I see you got the Michael Jordan, you got the Michael Jordan jersey behind you, you got the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. And the conversation is always going to come up with Mike and with LeBron and whoever else you want to throw in there. But is it really a fair comparison based on the times in which they play, or do you look at it as a microcosm of their skill set and say it doesn't matter when you start to look at who's the greatest?
Well, no, Jimmy, look, I can have this conversation with you because you understand. Okay, let's get out of the business of the media and all of that. Let's just be a couple guys like you and I are just talking. Now, we all know because of our backgrounds of playing professionally, right? And a lot of people doesn't have this perspective. We know that the rules were different. The rules currently now are different. The travel is different. The refereeing is different. So it is an unfair comparison to say who is the greatest because everyone's not playing by the same rules.
Right.
Let's make that clear. That it's impossible, right? So what Oscar Robertson and the late Bill Russell and the late Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, it's unfair to compare them to today's players because they were dealing with a different set of circumstances. Equipment is different. The sneakers are different. The gymnasiums in which they're playing, the travel, food, training. There's so many things that we can throw into the equation before we start saying who's the greatest. In order to have an accurate assessment of that, everyone's got to play by the same rules. Now, just a simple rule when you and I play, impeding of progress. It's a big thing, Jimmy. That's a big thing. So imagine I can still remember in 1994, 95, when you and Jamal Mashburn came to the United Center and Jamal Mash put a 50 on us and then you put a 38 on us.
Right.
And that was with like hand checking. Okay. So we know that the game is different. You and I weren't shooting threes irresponsibly like we see the players are shooting today. We weren't playing pace and space. We had to throw it into the big guy, get to the post, and then we operated out of that. We had to do things. It was a different time. So when I hear these comparisons, they're great for the barbershop. They're great for TV. They're great for debate. They're great for all of the things that we love about the media. However, because of our, we were fortunate enough to play, we both know that was different. So it's an unfair comparison. I admire these players today for the era that they're playing in, but let me assure you that if Jimmy Jackson and I saw you and I played against you, I know you were a 25 to 30 point scorer easily in this era because I saw you in the previous era. Okay. And that era was a little different because they were hand checking. The game was a little bit more physical. I'm not saying it's better. It was just a different game defensively. People weren't switching like they're just, everyone switches now. You'll come off a screen now and a guy 5'11" would be guarding you. Well, a guy 6'6" couldn't guard you. I know if a guy 5'11" was going to guard you on a switch based on your skill set and how you played. So it's a different time. It's a different era. And I always try to appreciate the eras in which, players play in. And then you look at it and say, now, which do you think would transfer from one era to another? These players, without question, could have played in that era, but let me assure you, it was a different time. Just like if you played in today's era, it would be a different time. So, I just try to look at it holistically, but it's a fun debate. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy people's arguments, though.
Here's my biggest thing is that it's really hard because if you look at numbers, Kareem's numbers from high school, 72-game win streak, 96-6 to his college, 3 times the National Player of the Year. I mean, they took the dunk away because of Kareem, okay? Just how dominant he was. And then his domination in, the NBA, okay? Yep. The most unstoppable shot. If you look at totality of this basketball, Kareem, to me, is the best that ever did it. Totality.
Yeah.
Okay?
Jim, yep. And I'm so happy you said that, Jimmy, because if you look at the most accomplished player perhaps ever, you would have to say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
It's Kareem. It's Kareem.
If you go to high school, you go what he did in college, what he did in the
3
NBA.
years. Remember, because he couldn't play as a freshman in college.
And so the most accomplished player has to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. No doubt about it. What he was able to, it speaks for itself. Like there hasn't been a player more accomplished than a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. All right. So when you say that, end of discussion. You can argue however you want to argue it. Here are the numbers. Look at it. Here are the numbers. If you just want to say accomplishments individually, collectively, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is standing at the top of that list.
You know what's interesting too is that you get this debate too about could LeBron play or Steph play back in the 90s, especially Steph, because they say, well, he's too small, whatever. And here's my comeback to that. I said, you can't transfer Steph's current game and mentality and take it back to the late 80s, 90s, because one, he'd be taught to play a lot different. He wouldn't be shooting 30, 40 footers, okay? And if that's the case, a BJ Armstrong, a Muggsy Bogues, a D Brown, a Michael Adams, Dana Barrows, all of these smaller guards wouldn't be able to, they played in the 90s. And the reason why is they grew up playing in the alley, in the backyard, at the park, in small gyms. So they were accustomed to the physical play. So I would say Steph, if he had skill set, he would spud. You would learn to play the way it was in the 90s, and Steph would be a totally different player. Not to say that he couldn't compete. He would just be a different form of Steph. Now, I take it a step further, and I say Shaq would be a different player today. To me, he would be more like Embiid with regards to his skill set, because coming up at the age of 11, 12, 13, he wouldn't be put in the post. He'll be pick and pop space. So his game would be totally different. So to your point, to transfer talent and say this player would be a certain way, and you play with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was low post, mid-range, got to a spot. But if he played in today's era, yes, he would have that dog and he would have that fire, but he wouldn't be in the post playing like that, because that's not what guards do. his game would be different, not his mentality. I'm saying his game would be different. Am I off on that?
No, you're absolutely right. Some players transfer regardless of what era they're in.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at Shaq, Shaq was the first player that I saw in our era that had the physical capabilities to challenge Michael Jordan from a dominance. Now, there were others, right? Akeem Olajuwon certainly was there, and you had other great players. But I saw a force that couldn't be stopped. Now, the thing about Shaq that I always admire is because Shaq didn't compensate, and he was unapologetic being big. He knew he was big. Now, today, you have to take into account, Jim, because you do not only pro games, you do college games. You have big guys who are big, and then you have guys who are tall. Shaq was a big man.
Oh, wait, say that again. Say that again.
Okay, you have big guys who are big. There's just that's the big man. That's the big fella. And then you have tall guys. Porzingis is tall.
Yes.
Shaq is big.
Big.
Jokic is a big man. Okay, he's a big man. He plays big. The one thing about Shaq that I knew, and Shaq demanded this, is that you treated him like a big man. Many of these big guys today, I'm watching them do things like they're doing 5-out offense and then they're doing dribble weave. Shaq. Now, I don't know what era or what coach would ask Shaq to do a dribble weave on the perimeter, but Shaq knew where his bread was buttered, and he knew what he could do as a big man.
But wait. But wasn't that because that's how he was taught to play back then? What if he grows up now at that same size? He's taught to play differently, though, right? He's not getting 15, 20 touches on the block.
I agree with you. He would be taught different, but however, there is an awareness of knowing what you can and can't do. The players today are coming into the league so young, they're still not aware of their skill set. That's why we depend on development. Shaq came into the league, knew, hey, I'm big. He came in saying, I'm big. Shaq wasn't trying to figure out how to post up. Now, that's one thing he did from day one when he stepped into this league. That's what I've always admired about guys who went to college. You learn about yourself. You learn about your game. When you came into this league, right? When you came into this league, on day one, you could score that basketball. Now, the other things, you picked up. I got to learn how to defend this guy. I got to learn.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Jim, when I first saw you, you could put that ball in the basket. Now, I don't know how you had that awareness, but you knew that about yourself.
College.
And that's
like
the
you
thing.
Said, college.
Yeah, that's where you learn about yourself. So Shaq was very aware that he was a big man, always played like a big man. And thank goodness he was a nice man, because Shaq had a mean streak in him. And when he did get mad, there was nothing you could do. There was nothing you could do against him. So I think Shaq would have been great in any era because Shaq had a self-awareness. The great players all have an awareness. Like, Michael could have shot threes. He could have shot any shot he wanted. He had the purple light. He could have did everything he wanted. But he had the discipline. He had the discipline to say, this is what I do. This is how I do it. And now everyone's got to figure out, how to, function around that, because he was so efficient and he was an expert at what he did. So when you are playing with a great player, they have this unwavering confidence. And I just think that transfers. Now, everyone doesn't have that confidence. And sometimes you can easily be, sidetracked with trying different things. However, the great players, they just know. Like, I don't know how they know. They just figured it out at some point, and then they perfect it. And then, as they say, the rest is history.
Well, great perspective, too. And for those who don't know, BJ, transition agent with Wasserman, also represents Derrick Rose, but been around the game from the management perspective, but also now representing players. And this is a question right here in today's world. Ratings are down a little bit compared to, a few years ago or even last year. in your mind, is the game in a good place? And if not, what needs to change? Or if it is, why is it?
Yeah, well, Jimmy, that's a great question, and I love basketball. So wherever the ball is bouncing, the shoes are squeaking. There's always something to learn. However, I think if there's one criticism of the game or one thing that we can discuss is the way the game is played during the regular season as compared to where the game is played during the playoffs. We've really, in my humble opinion, now we've gone a little bit too far now with the 3-point shooting. I love to shoot, being a 3-point shooter myself, right? That sounds kind of odd for me because you're saying, wow, man, this guy, I shot at a high clip when I played, in the NBA. However, there has to be a balance, Jimmy. There has to be a balance. And being a scorer, being the number one or number two or number three option on your team, that requires you to have the discipline to not only just take shots because your play is being called. Right. You have to have the discipline to be able to take the best available shot, right? The more uncontested shots that you can get, the better your team is, the better it is for the game. But more importantly, if we're going to put the emphasis on winning, not just scoring points, not just playing a style because 3 is more than 2, there is a responsibility, right? And, you were a scorer. I had to be a distributor and a guy who had to play so that I can provide the spacing for the guys to score. Well, that came with the responsibility. Jimmy, if you got double teamed, you had a responsibility to pass it to me. Why? Because you knew in the fourth quarter, you're going to have to take that shot. Okay. So there was a responsibility to pass it to your teammates so that you can set up the other facets of the game, so you can dictate the tempo, so you can dictate time and score and all these things. Well, now, Jimmy, what you're seeing is people are just playing irregardless of time and score, which really de-emphasizes of why we play the game. Are you trying to win the game, or are you just playing because you got to get up 53s? Because now I'm seeing people shoot a 3 on a 2-on-1 break. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Timeout. You're seeing guys just shoot 3s now with no responsibility. So I get it. 3 is more than 2. However, we want quality shots. And every good team, when they get to the playoffs, right, you have to get the you got to get the highest quality shots that you possibly can, because the defense, every time you advance, improves. So I would like to see the emphasis on, let's get the highest quality shot, regardless. If the team is giving you 63s, so be it. But you can't tell me as I'm watching the games that that's the defensive scheme of all 30 teams, because all 30 teams are playing the same exact way. So with that saying, I just think we should get back to saying, what is the strength of your team? What's the strength of that player? What's the strength of giving this group the best chance to win in today's NBA? Because everyone is not Steph Curry. If he is the level of excellence, where there's only one of him, I get why he's shooting 3s. But when you watch the other teams, you're saying, wait a minute, why is this guy shooting 3s? He's shooting, a 25% clip or whatever he is. But I just would like to see the game get back to utilizing the strengths of the players that are available. Getting back to saying we want, quality shots. We want to execute and play our brand, our style of basketball, and when we played, the Lakers had Showtime. The Celtics played a certain way. The Bulls had the triangle offense. When you were in Dallas, you guys had your style. The Denver Nuggets had theirs. Everyone had their style. The Detroit Pistons had a style. But we all weren't playing the same exact way. This is what gets me. How can all 30 teams say this is how we play in today's game?
Well, and it's interesting because the last 3 champions done it differently. You still had Golden State, who did it with their small ball lineup kind of in the 21-22 season when they beat the Celtics, okay? But then Denver was different. They don't shoot a lot of 3s. It was Jokic running the show, and it was Jamal Murray hitting big shots. It was, KCP doing his thing on the side. It was Aaron Gordon. So they were built and ran a little different. Then you had Boston, who spread you out 5 across, can all shoot threes. And but it's interesting you talk about that because as much as teams want to emulate each other, I just gave you 3 examples of the last 3 champions that did it different. Golden State did it their way, Denver did it their way, and Boston is doing it their way. And Boston shoots 40% of their shots come from behind the 3-point line. So I don't know the answer if it gets back to the balance of the two because of the way teams look at analytics. I don't know if we get that dynamic of a more of a balance of 2-point shots compared to 3. I don't know. I don't know where the game is going because it continues to evolve. But it's going to be interesting. Now, with that said, too, when you talk about the ratings, did you see any of the Emirates Cup?
Yeah, I've been watching. I watch I watch the game. I'm addicted to the game. It doesn't matter. I can watch any. I can
so
watch
you weren't
anything. I just love the game.
You weren't one of those. You weren't one of those skeptics early, like, oh, what are they doing with this in-season tournament?
Well, I didn't quite understand it, but because I'm in this global business, I have to understand the global perspective, right? You know, when you go to Europe and you go around the world, you know, it's just kind of, you know, this is just emulating what the rest of the world is doing. It just happened now they're doing it here in the United States in the NBA. So this isn't a new concept. It just happens to be new here in the NBA. So I'm fascinated by it. I watch it. You know, what's interesting to me is that the coaches coach different, the players play different, and now they're playing for something within the regular season. So I get it. I understand it. However, you know, it's going to take some time for the American audience who doesn't view European basketball, for instance, or Euro Cup or Euro League to understand the concept of this in-season tournament, the Emirates. I think it's the Emirates, you know, in-season Cup. Yep.
There you go. Emirates. It was NBA Cup last year. Now we got a title spot. We got a title sponsor, BJ. You know.
You and I, we're talking basketball, but now you're talking about the business. That's another conversation. So we can go there if you want to, though.
Okay, but in your current role to being an agent, and we'll talk about the European players real quick, is that it's so much talk about how much more skilled the European players are coming out and ready to play, right? Mm-hmm. Which is true in some aspect. And I think my good friend Brian Scalabrine brought this up, and I thought it was a key point. When we talk about European development and you're out there scouting kids and you're watching, he made a great point that we're always identifying the European big as being the model in which American players, American bigs need to emulate. But if their development system is so good, how come the guards over there are not coming over here playing and dominating? It seemed, and Brian brought this up, which was a great point, that as much as we want to talk about the European brand of basketball and grooming and growing, that's great for big men. But when it comes to guards, the Americans still dominate that conversation because the European guards haven't been able to come over to America and have that same impact as the European big. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to try to make this as short as possible because that's a big question. Okay, so first, when you look at the game, you have FIBA rules, which is a totally different game than, let's say, the NCAA rules, which is a different game than high school rules, which is a different game from AAU, which is a different game from the NBA. Okay, let's establish this right now. I go all around the world watching basketball. The only place in the world the NBA game is taught is in the NBA. Think about that. Jimmy, just think about that right there. The only place in the world that the NBA game is taught is in the NBA. This is the only place. So now we're looking for transferable skills that will transfer to the game that's only played here. It's much easier for a big to transfer and play in the NBA than it is for a guard because a guard has to manage the game. You won't see the speed and quickness in Europe that you see here. Okay. Now, what does this mean? Let's take the Olympics. How come Serbia, for instance, France, for instance, how can they play against our all-star caliber players that we send over there? How can they play in a very competitive game in the Olympics? Because of the rules. The rules are different. The game is different. The way you coach the game is different. So it takes away certain aspects that we're accustomed to talking about. So when you talk about basketball, you have to take into account the rules, the structure of the game. Now, the most important thing now, which in my opinion now, this is my opinion, what has happened is the coaching over there is better than the coaching is over here now.
Why?
Because they have a system of coaching. You have to be certified to coach.
You talking about on the lower level, even if it's the professional side of it, you gotta have
there's a
certifications and qualifications. Okay.
Yeah, you just can't be a EuroLeague coach.
Okay.
You can't just be a Euro Cup coach. You can't just coach because you like basketball. There is a certification process. Their coaches coach like we used to coach in the 80s and the 90s because that's where they all learned it. 92 was an important event that happened in the 92 Olympics because for the first time, the rest of the world had a chance to see our very best players in person and learn and study. So when you look at Jokic, when you look at Luka Doncic, when you look at these players, now they had a vision to see what our best look like live, not on tape. They only saw Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, these guys on tape. Well, in 92, they saw them live. They knew they were seeing the best. Then you started seeing all of the coaches go over there and started coaching their coaches. Now, when you watch EuroLeague, they play more physical than we do now because their coaching, they were influenced by all of those coaches in the 80s and the 90s. It's no wonder that today's players, right? Because I've been watching this now for 30, 35 years. There's no wonder that these players are better. Why? Because they play like all of the people that you see right here. They're emulating those players. That's the difference. Now we have a different way of playing. You don't see them playing pace and space over there. When you go over there, you're not driving to the basket and getting a layup. No, they're playing like we used to play. They're playing a game. You don't come down and just shoot a three there. No, you come down and you make your passes. You're setting screens. You're doing cuts. You're running sets. Now, they play what we call advantage basketball. You have a 3-on-2. Okay, you can play. 2-on-1, you can play. 4 against 3, you can play. If not, we're going to run something. They're very responsible. And if you look at their best players that are coming over here now, it's one element that they have with all of their players. They can pass the ball, regardless of position.
Yep.
Okay. All of their guys can pass the ball. So there are certain things that transfer, right? We're talking about good teams. What's the 3 things that all good teams have to do? They have to defend, they have to rebound, and they have to share the ball. Okay. Jokic, once he improved defensively, the rest is history because he can rebound and pass with the greatest of them. It's just any big that can pass the ball, okay? Kareem, Wilt, Akeem, because those guys they can catch the ball from an operating area on the post and pass to the other 4 guys. Jokic is just a fascinating player because he can pass the ball to all 4 guys for 48 minutes. I mean, Jimmy, that's unheard of. That's unheard of for a player to be that good, to be able to pass the ball to the other 4 guys and be big when he needs to. You can't play small ball against him. Same with Joel Embiid. Same now with Giannis. I mean, Giannis is already a 2-time MVP. Luka Doncic. These guys can pass the ball now at a clip that we just hadn't seen. So that's the advantage that they have. They understand the aspect of playing with the other 4 guys better than our young players here in America. If you're just saying, if you want to compare the difference, they have to pass the ball when you play over there. That's a requirement. There's no one-on-one. There's no like isolation basketball. They have to play a team concept. But, it's the NBA game is a different game. And now at some point, which we'll get back to the basics of the game. We will get back to what was our advantage. We have to play a blended brand of basketball. The great players are always going to get the most plays. However, today's best players are going to have to learn how to play with the other four guys. And now we kind of got away from that. And that's what you're seeing right now. The difference between the Europeans that are coming over here or the international players and the players that are from America. We're not playing a blended brand of basketball. That's what made Larry Bird great. That's what made Kareem great. That's what made Magic great. They played a blended brand of basketball that was just far superior. No one player, no matter how good you are, as you know, Jimmy, you can't beat a team that plays together. And when you put that combination, now you're in an elite category as a player and as a team.
No, I love that explanation, man. And it breaks down the differences between mentality, the coaching, the style. I think the style of play, which you talked about too, about it being taught a certain way, and about the passing aspect, because that skill set is so underrated. Coaches talk about the passing aspect, but you see a lot of flaws with a lot of our players regarding just being able to make some real simple passes, especially post passes or reading the defense, man.
Right.
And I love that thought process, and that's why I want to ask you that. And before we get out of here, though, I had to ask you this. So this is the good part right here. I need to give me one of your best Michael Jordan stories. Whether it was from practice, a game, something for you. I know how fiery he was, in practice, but give me one that probably people don't know.
Yeah, it's so many stories, and I always try to respect privacy. So, the privacy of the things that I was able to share with him, just like he was just so impactful. But the thing that I always remembered from him, and that he always encouraged me, and I'm sure others, is to never, ever lose your confidence. Ever. And one of the most impressive things with him, and I saw him do some incredible things. But I remember one night we were playing, and the story. I think the story was even in the Last Dance, where he had just an awful game versus the Washington Bullets, and I think he missed like 18, 19 shots in a row. I was just so impressed with his confidence, Jimmy, that he didn't hesitate. When like Jimmy,
the 20th shot came around, he was
and Jimmy, you know how it is. You miss 5 in a row. You like,
right.
Man, I gotta get to the free throw line. I gotta take a good shot.
Right.
Okay, the confidence that this man had, Jimmy, was beyond. Okay, and I listen, I'm going to tell you this. And I remember after the plane, and you know how it is, Jimmy, you try to maintain whether, you had a good game, bad game, whatever. But this particular game, after the game, he wasn't happy at all. And he was, normally he's bubbly, he's playing cards, he's this, whatever. He's being MJ. But this night, he was just sitting in the back. So I thought, hey, let me just go check on this guy. And I just said, hey, man, how you doing? You all right? You good? Just checking on you. He was in the back. Everybody else is whatever, doing what they do. And he was like, yeah, I'm good. And I remember he told me, he said, whatever that kid had in the first half, I'm going to have that in the first half.
Whatever that kid did.
Whatever that kid did the game, whatever that kid did in the first game, I'm going to have that in the first half. But the confidence to say that, Jimmy, was like, man, I just watched you miss 19 shots in a row. Like,
Right.
It was just the confidence was there. You know what I mean? Like you can't coach that. You can't, you can't duplicate that. Either you have that or not. He's always been my favorite because of his confidence. Like I've never seen someone with this level of confidence, this level of focus. It's one thing to talk it, but it's another thing to go out there every night and do it because you're playing against the very best players in the world. I was so impressed with the 20th shot when he finally made a shot because I remember what he said. He was like, "Okay, B, I'm good now." He made the 20th shot and he was like, "Okay, I'm good now. Let's go." And I was like, hey, what game is he watching? Like, I'm looking around like this, like, what game did he say? Like, man, you just missed the last 19 shots. And he was like, okay, I got it now. But
that's like you can't leave the court without making your last shot.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just that level of confidence that I was like, okay, we go out there, everybody's shooting thousands of shots a day. No, this man had a confidence that was just beyond. And he wasn't talking it. He believed it. He believed in himself. He believed in the work he had put in. But more importantly, he just had a self-awareness that you can't imagine. And that's what I admired most about him. And even when you talk to him today, he still has that level of confidence. And it's the funniest thing because now we're all old, but he still has the confidence that he had as a young man. And that is what I give to this generation. Never lose confidence in yourself by the work you put in. And I saw someone do it. You can't fake that. You can't fake the hard work. And you know what? You always find out who you really are when things aren't going right. And I saw a man miss his first 18 or 19 shots. And that was, to me, I would have changed something about my game. I would have changed something. But him, he's like, I got it.
I'm good.
Like, this is what I do. And I was like, you know what? Hey, I threw it to him. I just wanted to see it. I was like, okay, let me just see what this guy's going to do, And as you know, the story goes, then he went into Washington the next night. But I just remember the missed shots. I just remember that it was clear to me because I was trying to get him going. We need you to win. And it just wasn't there that night. But you couldn't tell him he wasn't there. He still believed it. And, just.
Rest is history, bro.
Oh, yeah. It was classic. I was in shock. I was just like, let me see how many he's going to miss before he finally says, I got to do something different. It just never registered. It didn't register. I was like, man, where do I get that type of confidence from?
Man, I mean, but that's what makes the greatest great because of that mentality. And you've been through it, man. And I say congratulations to you on a great career, NBA-wise, but post-career, what you're doing with the young men who are trying to find themselves early in their career from a basketball perspective. Keep doing your thing, man. I love to get you back on as we get on.
You're always in my home. Thank you for the work you've done during your career. You came in, I remember you gave me 38 that night and you were nice about it. You smiled when you did it. You gave me 38 that night. You're a young player and I was like, okay. And but no, I'm so happy for you and what you're doing in post career as well. And thank you. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, bro. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you too, you and the family.
Yep, you too. Yep.
What I thought was interesting, I think BJ Armstrong for jumping on, is that, you had to have a certain amount of confidence. He was talking about don't lose your confidence. You had to have a certain amount of confidence to play with the Michael Jordan, with the Kobe Bryant, when things weren't going right for you to still be able to step up. So I thought it was very interesting that he was amazed at what Michael Jordan was able to do mentally when he wasn't playing well, he didn't have a game. But yet and still for BJ too and other players, they also had to have a short memory and a confidence because MJ expected a lot out of you. So great interview by BJ, and I appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for joining me this week. I know the holiday season is coming up. Emirates Cup is coming up this weekend. The semifinal game is on Saturday. The championship is on Tuesday. So by next week, when I'm on the road with the Clippers, we'll be in Dallas for that home-and-home baseball series. We'll have a new Emirates Cup champ. We can talk about that. So I want you to enjoy your weekend, enjoy the games, enjoy the cup. I appreciate all the support. And I'll get at you next week once I'm in Dallas. Take care.